Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Van. Hey, Alan.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy Thursday, everybody.
Happy Thursday. I thought
Happy
Tuesday of
Thursday
this. I thought that Tuesday of this week was Thursday, so it's been one of those.
I thought Monday of this week was Friday.
Lee, how are you holding up?
I'm good. Energy levels are high within our virtual office walls. So, but yeah, it's good. Lots of good work happening.
Okay, good to hear.
I was trying to like switch my brain from work mode to GraphQL mode in the last few minutes.
It's been interesting at work last few weeks.
Definitely so. Participant list is starting to look stable. So I think we can get started. Welcome, everybody. Huge thanks to Benji, who's been helping merge some pull requests. But, you know, as always, a reminder, if your name isn't in the agenda now, we like to just have it as a record of who's in each meeting. So feel free to add a pull request to add your name to the agenda if you missed that. Okay, let's kick things off. Going down my list of agenda here, hopefully everybody has a link to this. Let me just drop it in the chat just in case, but hopefully y'all have that. At the beginning, we always like to remind everyone that we, in being here, agree to the membership agreement, participation guidelines, and code of conduct. Links to all three of those are in that agenda file in case you forget what's in them. One reminder, haven't read them before, they're right there. And then we like to do around the room intro of everybody here. So we can put some names to faces. We have a nearly alphabetical sort, which is great, but we'll just go in the order that it appears in the agenda at the moment. So that's me on top. I'm Lee, your faithful leader. And we'll go to Alan from there.
Hi, I'm Alan Cha. I'm representing IBM Research. I maintain the Open API to GraphQL library, as well as I'm interested in GraphQL management.
Hey, everybody, this is Brian with the Linux Foundation, and I help support the various operations of the GraphQL Foundation.
Hey everyone, this is Benji. I maintain the GraphQL suite of tools and also have various spec things on the go.
I don't see Eloy here, so I'll go next. Hi, I'm Evan. I work on GraphQL at Shopify and also ended up kind of the de facto representative of GraphQL Ruby here.
I'll go next. I'm Matt. I work at Facebook and mostly work on client-side GraphQL.
Dan Schaefer, fellow Facebooker, these days working less on GraphQL, but here emeritus, I suppose.
Hi,
I don't
go
see
ahead.
Michael. Yeah, go ahead.
Give Sasha a minute to get on. I'm Steven, work with Netflix, and just coming back from parental leave after about 6 months, so it's good to be back.
Congrats, welcome back.
Thank you.
Sasha, you here too?
I am. Hey everyone, I'm Sasha. I work at Twitter. Yeah, I'm here to lurk and stuff.
I'm Uli, a member of the guild and also lurking around.
Hi, I'm Morris from IBM. We have a GraphQL proxy that I'm working on.
Hi everybody, my name is Andy. I maintain GraphQL Java and also work for Atlassian.
And my name is Mike Cohen. I work on some GraphQL things here at Indeed, and I'm here to learn and help how I can.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I help to maintain GraphQL.js, and sorry about the echo. We just moved to a new office and there is no furniture, and so I basically in meeting room there is me and my chair and nothing else. So that's why it's echo.
Pretty wild. Anybody else here that didn't get to intro themselves so far?
James Baxley, formerly of Apollo, currently of myself. Yeah, here to hang out, be part of the steering committee right now.
I'll go if there's no one else.
Sure.
This is Robert from AWS, and I used to work on GraphQL at Facebook.
Did we miss anybody? All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. I see a handful of pencils in our list, and I see our notes file already filling up. So maybe it's just a formality, but we have everything covered for note takers. I assume Alan, Benji, and Stephen, you guys are in there doing great work. Let me know if you need any help. Okay. We have a little bit of an upside down piece. So I do want to review our agenda before we jump all the way into it. We have some TSC stuff to vote on. That's going to be exciting. We want to talk a little bit about Summer of Code for this year. We'll do review action items at the end of the meeting, and we'll do this promoting and documenting the spec release as well. So relatively short, which maybe is a good thing, but anything anybody wants to add to this agenda that's not already here? I hear no noise, so I think this codifies our agenda. All right, well, forgive me for bouncing around number order a little bit, but we'll go to our TSC vote first. Before we do a vote, obviously, we should talk about what it is that we're voting on. So I'll hand it to Brian to kind of explain what's up with this new membership doc.
Sounds good. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we talked about this a little bit in, I believe, the past working group meeting. Basically, when GraphQL was set up underneath the GraphQL Foundation and when the GraphQL specification project was formally set up, it's done under a certain set of documents from the Joint Development Foundation, which allows you to quickly and easily spin up specification projects. The version that we used when we set up the GraphQL specification project had a couple of things in it which make it a little bit difficult to release specs quickly. For example, requiring a new signed document when everybody, whenever you want to, from everybody who contributed, whenever you want to release a spec. Since the time when we set this up, Linux Foundation had taken over management of Joint Development Foundation and made some improvements to make this process considerably easier. One of the notable improvements was that you sign the specification membership agreement one time, which is, of course, what everybody's done in order to be here. There's no cost to that or anything. It's just you're basically saying you agree to it. And then that's it. Then we don't need to collect signatures again every time we want to do a release. And this is, of course, important for a project like GraphQL that has multiple working groups underneath it, multiple different projects. That this is a definite improvement in the amount of overhead that it would take to have things be formally adopted. So the TSC is in a position where they are able to, by vote, upgrade the documents from the V4 documents to the V5 documents. We just needed to have a fairly substantial number of TSC members here on the call to actually do it. There are a couple of things I'll go through before I actually take you through the vote. It's a somewhat formal process, but I'll walk you through it. Basically, the slide that I have up here says, here's this is what's changing, but also what to expect. So one of the things which we were somewhat concerned about was that there's a 30-day notice period after we take this vote before we can say that the new version of the specs or new version of the specification membership agreements are adopted. What this means, though, is at the end of that time, then the TSC can reconvene, vote to approve the spec as a released specification, and then we have the newest version of the GraphQL spec. TSC has had the documents to review and then also reviewed the red line from the V4 to the V5. I didn't get any questions on it, but if anybody does have any questions, now would probably be a good time to ask. Otherwise, we can move forward to the vote.
Sounds good. Anybody have any questions about this?
Just for somebody who's not a TSC member, are the two documents available somewhere?
Yeah, so I opened up the new document, or opened up a pull request with the new document. It's, I think, currently the only PR that's open. The main thing really to be aware of is just that it moves some things around. It doesn't change any of the commitments, so that we'll maybe start with that. It just moves some things around and makes some processes easier, like releases. Otherwise, the existing signatures on the existing documents are good. You know, we don't have to come back and collect new signatures from everybody.
You're referring to the JDF PDF file that you had?
Yes. Yep,
cool.
That's correct.
I did merge that one in. I'll post the link in the chat because.
Thanks, Lee.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. So we have met our fairly strict quorum requirements here. So I guess if there are no questions here, we'll just take this forward for a vote. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the new version of the JDF specification or the GraphQL specification membership agreements?
I move to adopt the new version.
All right, thank you. Do we have a second?
Thank you, Dan.
I second. No,
Oh,
I
geez.
third.
Okay.
I fourth.
So Lee, we have Dan moved and Lee second. Okay, great.
Give someone else a second. Who is the second? Somebody else said they seconded.
Yeah, I said it, but whatever.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Okay, I'll have you second. Okay, now TSC members, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, do we have any opposed? Any abstains? Great, thank you. So now we have adopted the V5 documents. This will make things a little bit easier going forward, specifically for Lee and myself, but should make things hopefully easier for the other maintainers of the working groups as well. I think that's everything that I had on this particular topic. The one closing piece of information, so in that PR that Lee just merged, it has the final version of the documents. I also included in there a write-up on how to actually sign the documents for people who haven't signed them already. Just as a recap, this is pretty straightforward. We have a bot that we enable on the repositories that checks to see whenever, when somebody opens up a PR, whether they've actually signed the documents or not. If they haven't, it prompts them through the process. And there are two workflows to be aware of. One is you can sign it as an individual if you're doing work on your own behalf, or if you're working for a company, you can have the company sign it for you. We didn't have that well documented anywhere up until now. So now we do have that. And I believe it is in a directory called CLA. So it should be hopefully pretty easy to find. If you do run into any issues though, or if any of your colleagues run into any issues, please definitely reach out to me. We're going to be turning on the CLA bot for the rest of the repos here now that everything's well documented. Lee, I think that's everything I've got.
I've got two follow-ups, one that I can do and one that you can do.
Okay.
So one is we have this GraphQL/Foundation GitHub repo. That one has v4 of the JDF file in it still.
I will fix that.
So that one should be pretty easy. And the other one is that we actually do have a nice little phrase at the top of the GraphQL working group README file that says anyone can show up, but they have to go sign this spec membership agreement. And it links out to that Foundation repo. I'm just going to change that link to point to this new membership folder that you added, since it also has that nice explainer.
Yeah, I think that's a much more logical place to find it. The other side of this too, one of the reasons for asking people to PR themselves onto the agenda is that it will take them through this flow, and it will make sure that everybody who's attending the meetings has actually signed the membership agreement. So this is something for the other project maintainers or the working group maintainers. When we get this turned on for your repos, it will also enforce and make sure that the attendees to your meetings have signed all the necessary documents that they need to do.
Sweet.
Yep.
I believe that worked. Yep. Okay. I just updated the link on the GraphQL working group repos README file.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for that, Brian.
Definitely.
You have the next agenda topic 2, which is the summer of code.
Yeah, so I think that's the last thing that we needed for the TSC meeting. So I guess now the TSC meeting closed and we're back into the working group. So for the Summer of Code, we did Summer of Code last year. Yvonne was very helpful in the mentorship process, and Yuri, I believe you may have also mentored as well last year. The process is, or the application period is open again, and I opened up a file where you can drop in your suggestions for projects. I believe that it closes on February 19th. So if you could have everything in before that, if you do want to propose a project for Summer of Code, then we can review that and get it all submitted in time. It should be pretty straightforward. Lee, I don't know if you want to say something. I know that many of the folks here aren't on the governing board, but there was some discussion last year about how mentorship is it's a core part of the way that the foundation wants to help support the actual GraphQL projects. And
that's right.
At the time we had said, was it that we wanted to have at least 3 interns per year? I'm trying to recall exactly what it was.
I don't remember exactly where we landed, but I do remember last time this came up, it came up in the context of our board meeting. Luckily, we have a small handful of folks who overlap between those groups that include me and I don't remember who was there the last time we talked about it. Yuri, you may have been there. But I remember most of the discussion was actually from the technical contributors talking about which projects could or couldn't take Summer of Code mentees. And we realized that we were just having that conversation in the wrong place. And this working group would be a much more fruitful place to talk about this, since we actually have a large set of people who work on projects in the GraphQL ecosystem. So this really, like, the main thing that I want to point out is I feel like last summer we actually got a fair amount of value out of this. And Yvonne, maybe you can say something about what that process looked like for you. And my sense is that we should do this again, and we should kind of double down, but we should spread out across more projects. So we're not only in GraphQL.js. Graphical could be another one. We also have sort of all of your individual projects that are part of the sort of community suite of projects. If you want to participate, happy to expand it out to things not just under our immediate umbrella.
Yeah, like a couple of things. Sorry, by the way, about echo. So last year, I mentored Amar. One thing to note is that project ideas that you submit right now are just suggestions. Students can add project ideas themselves, or you can later suggest like project ideas to them also. So like before February 18th, it's mainly for mentors to volunteer, and project ideas are not finalized yet. So like you can submit yourself as a mentor and just suggest a couple projects. It's not mean students can select only from these projects. It can be anything else. If think about actually this year, it's different from previous year. It's shorter period. Previously it was like 300 hours. This year it's 180 or something. So it's for shorter projects, which make it easier for maintainers, and it's make like selection of ideas bigger. And last year it was our first year as organization for Summer of Code. So we had like 2 mentors, me and graphical maintainer. And I don't remember what happened with like student for graphical. It was some like situation, but we had a student for GraphQL.js, and he created a parser. Experimental project is still like experimental. We need to clean up some stuff after it, but important thing I want to point out, it's help both sides. It's help like students, and it's help like promote like contributions, and it helped to onboard like new maintainers and new contributors. But at the same time, it's like helped me personally because I previously I didn't have any experience of mentoring somebody, and it's like teaching you how to basically mentor people and how to onboard on the project. Another thing you can suggest, for example, right now for GraphQL.js we have active contributor Sahid, and he helped with TypeScript migration a lot. He did tremendous job making like PR super clean and like separate commits. I think he spent like hundreds of hours on it. And he's a student, so he eligible for Summer of Code. So we discussed it, and he will submit his application, and he have like pretty big chances since he already contributed a lot. So Summer of Code is a way to find new contributors, and it's a good way to help contributors who are the students and looking for summer practice. One thing I would say it was my favor and like general problem for GraphQL Foundation last year is that we failed to create good communication with applicants. I think like Uri helped and communicate with some of applicants for Summer of Code and Season of Dogs. But in general, we had a bunch of emails and with like simple questions. And this year we should like write document answering them instead of like ignoring them or like. So I think like we need to prepare more for communicating with applicants, because previous year it was like 50 or 70 applicants and like huge amount of emails.
I want to maybe, I don't want to be the downer, but I want to maybe add another thing that we might consider when we going to Google Summer of Code. I think we should also always remember that at this stage of the GraphQL.js project, Ivan's time is the most expensive thing we have. And we have like a very large project currently, the TypeScript migration, that we're working on for a very long while. And it's basically also holding up a lot of other projects that are waiting. And I think that what we should be very careful of is making sure that as much as Google Summer of Code is extremely important, and I support this project a lot, maybe others, including myself, that I can volunteer to it, can be the mentors and maybe offload some of that work for Ivan. So at least Ivan can keep focusing on, getting the TypeScript migration done. So all the rest of the projects will come in, and we can add more contributors, including, there's also, it's important to bring on new students and new people for the code, but there's also a lot of people in the community that have a lot of experience that also can become contributors. So just to make sure that we have the right priorities here.
It's a good point. I hope we can land this in a spot where it's not either or, but it's a really good point that we should be thoughtful about what projects we want to land people on to make sure that they're adding value. The goal that I have for the Google Summer of Code work is to create new future members of this community and long-term contributors. So if someone shows up, does a couple of projects for a few months, and then disappears, never to be seen of again, hopefully they leave behind some valuable work. And but I see that as a wash. Like the real win is if we get someone, land them there, they're really excited about it, they like the work, and they want to stick around in the open source community over the long haul beyond just the internship period. Obviously their frequency of work is going to slow down once they go back to school. But if we can keep them around, that's a good thing. The other thing I'd like to see if we get some Summer of Code mentees is to make sure that they join at least one of these meetings. I think that was I identified as a miss last time, is that we had them working, but they never really got to like meet this group of people who are really proactively pushing GraphQL forward across all projects. And that meant that we also didn't really get to like build a personal link to each of these folks. So that's one thing that I want to make sure that we do next time around. But great points to both of you. I do want to make sure we can move on to our next topics. The one lightweight action that I want to land here is if everyone could just think about potential projects, it's just much easier to do the connection if we already know what interesting projects look like, rather than sort of getting them pre-booked to a project and having them self assign a project after the fact. And last time we did it for graphical and GraphQL.js. Going forward, we could expand that set to a wider set of projects. So as long as it's open source, as long as it's sort of like a core piece of the GraphQL community, then we can make it part of the foundation umbrella. We can consider them.
Can I ask a follow-up question just out of personal curiosity? Like, what is the time effort required by Google Summer of Code to mentor somebody like Ivan, Yuri? Like, how much effort is this?
I think they ask you to volunteer like 5 hours a week at minimum. I think it's like the requirement. In practice, it's like depend on the project. One thing is that you can organize a lot of this work asynchronously. You don't need to spend like 5 hours on a call. Like you can ask your student to prepare like a fork or a branch or PR and just monitor his commits. But I think like 5-7 hours per week is per student is a requirement. This year they're actually doing like shorter period. So it's like previously it was 3 months, right now I think it's like 1.5 months or something. So
wow, that's short.
Yeah, so what they're saying now is that it's 10 weeks long with an average of 18 hours per week. So
18 hours from the mentee or the mentor?
From the mentee. So they cut it basically in half. So it's still roughly the same length, it's just about half time. I'm just looking to see if the mentor guide has any expectations on the amount of time.
Cool. A process that I found works really well for this is to have 2 synchronous check-ins and then time for code review. So if you're proactive with code review and you've got usually 30 minutes is good. Sometimes the follow-up can be shorter, but sometimes you need 30 minutes for both, and you just kind of stick 2 in a week spaced out. That tends to be good. You can catch high-level stuff in those, and you can also, talk about broader, more interesting things, questions on their mind beyond just the work. And that probably does add up. I would suspect it adds up to less than 5 hours, but that's not an unreasonable high watermark time expectation.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions on mentors, Summer of Code stuff? Otherwise, we can move on.
So just a small question in terms of the suggested projects. If we want to submit ourselves, where do we do it?
I think I linked it in the agenda. Let me just double check.
Sorry.
No worries. Then the agenda is a link to the a proposal template, and we have a channel in the Slack. I think probably the right thing to do here is to use this directory and just make them individual files. So copy the template that Brian put together, fill out the idea. They don't have to be super in depth, as you'll see. It's like 2 sentences of the description, a couple bullet points of the objectives, what you need to see in a mentee, and then who's available as a mentor, and then submit that as its own markdown file. And we'll just have a bunch of files that we can then sift through at the end. And then you can just like ping in the channel if you have questions, or if you just want to say like, hey, come merge my pull request. Good question. Let's talk about promoting and documenting the release itself.
Yeah, so this is another one that I put in the agenda. So basically, now that we have the V5 membership agreements adopted, it will be a lot easier to cut the release, and we need to actually start preparing for it. Lee, I think you've been doing a bit of work on cleanup on the spec, and I won't talk about that since you're the expert on that. But just will mention that we had a foundation marketing meeting, and we're going to be having these monthly from now on. And one of the things which we discussed is just ways which, you know, we can prepare for the spec release, how we can promote it, and how we can make sure that we have enough information out there about what exactly is what exactly is changing and what's been happening over the past 18 months or so. I won't take up too much time on this, but if you have documented one of your features, or have written up anything, or are interested in writing up something, please let me know or let Lee know. We'd like to accumulate these things and maybe put together just kind of a comprehensive picture of what we can use and what we can point to when the spec gets released, to be able to build a narrative around it. You know, here's what's changed, or here's something subtle which was resolved, or here's a community experience of working in the GraphQL community. You know, all of these things are really, these things are all really good to have, and this would be a really good time to point to some of those things, whether they are brand new or things which have been written, you know, over the past 18 months. Lee, do you want to say anything else about that?
Yeah, just to back up a bit and kind of explain the strategy and why we would do this in the first place. So you all know that for the most part, reference implementations and even internal implementations more or less track the draft, or even beyond that, they track just approved proposals even before they've been merged into the draft. So the spec, by and large, is in one part an artifact for us to follow along with. That's most of the value is live, and then this other part is a sort of mostly legal process where we occasionally mark a cut out and bucket them together. So like, what's the value of doing these spec cuts beyond the legal process? The other value is having a moment in time that is relatively irregular to essentially retrospectively look at all of the work that's gone into it and celebrate it at the same time. And that's kind of the perspective I want to take on this. It's not like the story isn't, hey, you can finally use all these things, because people have been able to use them all along. It's, let's look back at all of the work that's gone into GraphQL over the last, I think it's been 18 months at least, probably longer since the last cut. And the strategy for doing that is not a, you know, PR briefing from the GraphQL Foundation blog or something like that. I think that would be A, not a great way to celebrate our work, and B, probably mostly ignored by the people who we want to see this. Instead, I think it's actually to let the individual people who are actually doing the work, aka all of us, to spend a bit of time writing about what the experience was like to contribute, the details of the work. You know, there are definitely a handful of things that are practical, like this is useful. You can do a new thing that you couldn't do before, and it's worth hearing what that's about. There's also a lot of stuff that's just kind of wonky, and, you know, ambiguity resolution. And I think that stuff is interesting. Maybe I'm weird, but I suspect a bunch of other people will also find that interesting that don't regularly show up to these meetings. And just to say like, hey, so maybe you're curious, like, what's it like to write a spec document? And when you find an ambiguity, like, what does that mean? What's the real world consequence, and how do you go about solving it? Those are really fascinating stories that I think people would really love to hear. And what we can do as part of like a marketing committee to pull this stuff all together is just kind of create a schedule for drawing attention to these various blog posts. I know some of these have already been launched. I think maybe halfway through last year, we started making it kind of an unofficial policy that for semi-major changes, as they're getting close to finalized, we want someone to go write a blog post that explains what they are and how to write them. We're just going to start to collect both the ones that we've already written and then also like the stories that we want to tell, and get them into a list. So both in the GraphQL Twitter account and then our newsletter and all the various other ways we have to talk to people, we can like regularly link out these blog posts. And then hopefully that'll create energy, not around the fact that a cut happened, but energy around the fact that there's work over the last year and change to celebrate. So that's kind of the context for why we're taking this approach. So the concrete request here is if you've written such a thing, we haven't been tracking this. So like, please ping it to Brian, ping it to me on Slack or wherever, because we want to start to track all these things in a list. And B, if you have an idea, either whether it's for something that you've done yourself, you want to write a post, you've got a topic that you want to write about, or something you want to you just want to see it happen and you think like, hey, this other person did this work that was really cool, they should write about it. Also, please message that to Brian and me. We're going to do a little bit of that ourselves, but I don't anticipate that the two of us will be able to come up with that full set of ideas. And we're going to build that into a list and then start to kind of build a process around it where for the ones that we want to see written, we were putting them in front of people as opportunities to see if they want to grab them, and then seeing how much of that we can finish in the next month or so before we go live with everything.
Not directly about the marketing side of things, but about the spec release, there are a handful of RFCs that are in kind of very late stages of just needing a kind of final editorial pass and then merge. Are we planning to do all of those like in a batch after the release, or are we going to try and squeeze them in?
I'm going to squeeze them in. Yeah, almost all of these are finalized and they just need final editorial passing from me before adding them in. Like they don't need any action from this group, therefore they should be completed.
Cool.
I know of at least 2 or 3. And actually one thing that you can do to help, I think I know about all of them, but most of what I've been using to find those are tags. So I look for things that are either tagged as editorial or tagged as stage 2. And those are the ones that I've been giving most of the attention. At some point in the end, I'll probably just call through all of the pull requests just to make sure I haven't missed anything, but there definitely are a pretty significant amount of pull requests there. I want to make sure I'm putting my energy into the ones that we most want to have merged.
All of the ones I can think of have action items assigned. So
great.
That's another place to track them.
I have a thing to suggest. One thing that may cause frustration is that some things are included in a release and some are not. Stuff like stream and defer, for example, it's like usable, but we decided to give it like experimental pass, and over the last couple of months people using it and they discover some things about it. So, and it's becoming popular, so like Rob and Lillian speaking on every conference and stuff. So, and one of the questions I was like on some panel organized by Hatsura a couple of days ago, and the question was why stream and defer is still experimental. So I think like in release notes, not in release notes, obviously release notes should include only stuff that released, but in a blog post about new release, I think it would be good to point out like stream and defer, plus we have a bunch of articles about it. Maybe like couple sentences explaining why it's experimental. We still like still collecting feedback. The same as about input unions. People actually want input unions, and we did a bunch of progress on it, but it's still not in the spec. So like I would say both posts can like mention some mention like current progress of this proposal and some links. In case of stream94 wrote an article about that, and in case of input unions wins and a bunch of other contributors create RFC, and we can point RFC and say like we're working on it, and you can track progress here.
Very good point. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I do plan on writing a release notes, kind of like a very detailed, here's every kind of detailed change that's landed in. But I really like that suggestion. And I think that's a good way to kind of frame the overall messaging is we've done a spec cut. Here's everything that's in this version of the spec. But then also here's all the stuff that we're currently working on, and like give just like a brief kind of sense of where it is in its process. Yeah, that's a great idea. I really like that. Cool. Any other thoughts? All right. I think the last thing we have is to work through our open action items and get a sense of which ones are done that we can close. Benji, you usually help us work our way through here. Where should we start?
Well, someone's been very helpfully filling this all out in the notes, which is fantastic. So I would normally do the ready for reviews first. So let's do them in, I guess, oldest order first. So we'll look at 507, which is moving the deprecated directive in the input fields RFC to stage 2.
One second, I'm just getting the same sort link that you've got. I'm going to share it here. Moving deprecated directive on input fields RFC to stage 2.
So I think this one is it's uncertain what the actual state of this is. And I think you, Lee, I think you were going to promote it at one point, but I'm not sure what the conclusion of that was.
Yes. I'm going to move this to stage 2 because, yeah, I remember last time we reviewed these, I took a look at the thread, realized that there was quite a lot of discussion, remembered that I had completely forgotten the context on this because I think this was a number of months ago that it was last in a working group meeting, and thought, hey, I should probably read that before I make a decision on moving it to stage 2. But in the light of what I just previously said, that I'm paying close attention to stage 2 tags, I'm going to do that because it's just a GitHub tag. So worst case scenario, I see something and go, oh crap, this was has some serious issue that needs it to be revised. But I'm going to go ahead and do that because I believe we have everything here that we need. I think maybe one thing that I might need your help with, Yvonne, is whether the deprecation of input values is up and running in GraphQL.js. Usually we look for that before moving to stage 2.
Yeah, it's running, and cool. We merged it long ago. One thing I need to check if I add validation rule. So like initial PR was abandoned by its after. So I adopted it as a new PR on a spec repo, and I need to check that I added validation rule to spec text about forbidding to deprecate required fields. we had like a bunch of discussion about this rule, and I need to check if I did it or not. In any case, it's like small edit. I will do it tomorrow, or not to block like a release process, because basically we merged it a long time ago, and the only negative feedback we get on it was because people misused GraphQL.js, and because they didn't use TypeScript or Flow, and so it was technical problems. There is no like real big issues with that, and we merged it, I think, like half a year ago or something. So I think it's ready from an implementation standpoint. I just need to check about this small validation rule. And by the way, Lee, to provide you context about it, all this long discussion was mainly about that. Should we forbid deprecation of required fields?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that sounds like that's the piece that might have needed some editorial. So I moved this to stage 2. Sounds like there's a little bit of follow-up that we might need. So let's leave this action item. Well, I'll if anyone's taking notes, we've moved to stage 2, but let's open a new action item to make sure that we've done the follow-up on this one, that there's everything that needs to be done for this is done, closed book.
Okay, so close this one and open a new one to just check that it's all been followed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so next would be 550, which is send removal notices to existing GraphQL.js contributors. I believe we discussed this last month, and we said if it's still open this month, we'll do it the fast way.
Yeah, I failed to deliver on that. Basically, I moved my entire company into a new office, which is like huge amount of unrelated work. So yeah, and I totally agree. Since it's open like for half a year or even more, yeah, like, let's do fast way.
We can always add people back. This is my pitch for the fast way is if you want to clean up the committers, you just whatever, flush them all out. And if someone shows up later and says, hey, why can't I commit? I should be able to commit. And you say, welcome back. And you add them right back in.
Yeah, one thing we need to be why I actually stuck on that, because like there is no way to check, at least I didn't find a quick way to check if somebody committed into organization for last like half a year or so. So there is a bunch of people from Facebook, some of them like never committed to this repo, to this organization. But some of them actually was active or is active. So like,
Clear them out.
yeah, it's yeah.
Matt's
For
telling
example,
Matt's telling you to throw them out. Throw them out. Yeah.
So somebody need to kind of manually check each person.
I don't think we need to manually check each person. I think you should just like knock them all out, because if they need to commit, they're going to show up and say, I need to commit. And the moment they do that, easy CLA is going to hit them if they haven't done that yet. And then like you'll have the bot do it for you. You won't have to manually check.
Okay, so who is personally responsible for clicking like delete buttons? I can do it myself, or like if anybody else who have like admin rights can do it.
I think you can do it. It's just a GraphQL.js specific one, right? So I'll leave
no,
it to you.
it like one consequence I want. Yeah, I have admin rights, so I can do that. And yeah, do tomorrow. One thing to note is most people added not as GraphQL.js collaborators or contributors, but as GraphQL organization contributors or collaborators. So by removing them, I remove them from all repos. But I believe like actually like, out of 70 people, 60 people, like almost all of them like never committed into
You know,
GraphQL.
if you want to do this in 2 passes, you can do a first pass where you look and see like these people obviously have never committed anywhere, super clean remove. Other ones that you're not sure about, then ping me or ping Matt, and we're happy to help follow up.
On that point, it seems to me like most contributors would only need to access a few repositories rather than all of the repositories. I think the broader access should generally be restricted.
Yeah.
So Lee, maybe it would make sense for you to whittle that list down quite considerably anyway.
I will do that. Yeah, if it's the GraphQL.js committers list specifically, then Ivan, I'll leave it to you to maintain that list. I think there is still a handful of sets that have broader access, and I will take the action to manage those.
One unrelated note, maybe is action item for next thing. We also need to clean up npm access because there is like people who have access to npm packages, and from security point of view, accessing npm packages is more harmful than accessing like repo itself. So
yeah, good
like
call.
definitely not with code, but like maybe somebody volunteer to.
We should probably maintain a high enough bus factor on this though, because if like everybody loses access to it who has access, that becomes much harder to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, like from
a bus factor of
people
4 is fine, probably.
Plus, I mean, people who's not active, like on some packages, there is like people who never cut release, so or never contribute, so they don't know how to do it anyway. So.
By the way, we have we require two-factor to publish, and right now the set of people who have npm access for GraphQL.js, at least I haven't looked at GraphQL yet, there's 7. And Matt, turn on two-factor for npm. I think there's a couple old school or relay crew in here that probably can be deleted. So I'll just go ahead and do that now.
We might, honestly, a relay person may be better for NPM than me because they've done more NPM releases, but yeah.
Well, I'll leave you there anyway, just in case, you need to help fix something. That's why you're here. All right.
Shall we move on?
I think so.
Awesome. Okay, the next one is issue 586, which was tasked to me. This was to ping Apollo about the Apollo schema store regarding potentially doing some research using any public schemas that they may have in there. James pointed me on to talking to Jesse about that. I have done so, and at the moment, Apollo don't have anything in place that would enable us to do that, or even to detect which of the schemas may or may not be public. It is something that he's interested in assigning as like a passion project for one of the Apollo engineers, potentially, but he can't commit to any timeline on that. So as regards doing research for the project that this was proposed for, which was the default value coercion rules, it's a no-go, but we may have access to some subset of that in future potentially. I mentioned it might be interesting, for example, to let people opt into allowing, for example, the GraphQL Foundation to use your schema as part of GraphQL research. And I think that would be a really cool thing for Apollo to be able to offer to the community, and for people to be able to offer. So I think something positive might come out of it, but I think it'll be a long while before it does so. Anywho, I think that this can be closed.
Cool.
By the way, in context of Summer of Code, last time we discussed, I don't remember whose idea it was, but maybe Andy, about creating a tool for anonymizing, kind of stripping domain from a schema, replacing a name with random identifiers, which would be really cool Summer of Code project, and would help us to collect anonymized schema from community without breaking NDA.
I proposed that idea to Jesse at Apollo, and he pointed out that you could use that to, for example, you could de-anonymize it. If you have a collection of schemas, you can see which one ends up being this anonymized schema, and then you could potentially use that to discover things that maybe haven't been released yet, that they're adding to their internal schema that they've not published yet. So there is still risk in that. Just changing names may not be sufficient to anonymize when the structure is still similar.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. I would love to follow up on that. But just in terms of, it was not only a suggestion, even GraphQL Java offers this feature already. So GraphQL Java has an anonymizer which takes a schema and a query and returns an anonymized schema and query. So yeah, it's fairly new, but it's already existing. But maybe still an interesting project for Summer of Code, I agree.
It's a good idea.
The interesting part for me would be like not just to make it an internal class in GraphQL Java or in AWS, but maybe like make it a repo and something you can submit to, also, you know, like make it accessible to people so that they can contribute schemas and kind of help the overall ecosystem by just saying, look, this is what we did. It's anonymized, but still this is what we did. Please make sure it's performant. For example, we sometimes get issues for, whoa, this is slow, and then, okay, your query is 10,000 lines long. That's not a joke, by the way. It's reality. And then, okay, 10,000 lines is a lot. What are you doing? We can't easily reproduce it. And then, please, yeah, this is where the idea from this anonymizer came in, to make it actually possible to submit people pull requests in open source project and help us to actually fix bugs and improve performance. And to make this even for a bigger ecosystem and have like kind of a repo, like Benji pointed out, for schemas would be absolutely awesome.
That would be awesome. Okay, should we move on to the next one?
Okay, so the next one is issue 587, which is explaining why the initial count behaves as it does, i.e. I think it's a required parameter, or maybe it's not, but either way, explaining whether it is or not and what the reason for that is. That was originally assigned to Kuei, and I think Rob has gone through his, Rob thinks it's been addressed in the RFC. Normally I would ask Rob to confirm that here, but I don't think he's on the call.
No, he's not here right now.
So basically Rob said that he thinks he explained it poorly on the last working group and that caused confusion, but actually it has already been explained in the markdown file, and he's given a link to the explanation there.
Cool. I remember the context on this one was in the discussion, we realized that none of us really understood why it was working the way it did, including Rob. And so Rob took the action to do a follow-up, and we thought QA, who was sort of the originator of this particular piece of the API, would have that answer. And then I think he probably like looked back in his notes and realized that he had just missed the understanding himself. So yeah, this one looks good to close. I think we're good.
Awesome. Yeah, it was to do with like whether it acts as a minimum or a maximum, I think, something like that. Lovely. Okay, next up would be 588, which is to make the initial count nullable, as we discussed last session. And Rob has mentioned that he's updated the spec pull request and the GraphQL.js branch to reflect that change.
Since
he did that
this
13
is spec
days
edits.
ago.
Great.
Cool. I'll go ahead and close that. Sorry, bear with me a second. Okay, so I think that's it for the issues that I have, the action items that I've actually marked as ready for review, where people have told me that this is done. There is still quite a lot of actions remaining from the last meeting. Yeah, I can certainly tell you that I haven't made any progress on any of mine. Would anyone else like to close any of their actions that they had assigned to them? If you've got the live notes open, there's a nice summary of some of them there. Mark is not on the call. Ivan, you had one about reviewing the RFC to assert a subscription field is not introspection. But I don't think you've done that because that's also one that I raised. So no, never mind. Lee, one on an editorial review of the no root introspection of the subscription RFC.
I have not finished that yet, but that one is actually pretty high on my list because that's part of finalizing the spec cut. So that one should be done by next meeting.
Okay.
And same for my other one from last meeting is on my short list. And sorry, I didn't get to that before this meeting, especially you, Andy, since I knew you were the one who proposed this one. But this one's also on my short list, so I'll get to this before next meeting. So our next batch is scheduled at new times.
We also have a couple of everyone issues, everyone to review the defer and stream specs. So please, if you haven't already, please go and do that. The other thing was if people are using default values that are input objects, or if they have input objects that have default values on their fields, or if they have both of those things, we'd very much like to hear from you. Please reach out and say that you're using one or both of these features. We would like to collect more data on this, so it'd be very helpful if you could. There has been one person, I'm sorry, I forget who it was, but one person has replied to that already, but it would be great to get more data on that front.
I also found issue I posted in the chat. 261 is about spec cut date. It's not action item, but it's an issue related to what we discussed today. So do we have a fixed date? And if we have, like maybe it's...
I'm just going to go ahead and close this. This is a pretty old issue. And it was before we had figured out the LF and JDF legal processes. And so the information here is pretty out of date. So I'll just drop a note here that we are in the final phases and expect it to be released in the next like 45 days, I think is a reasonable goal from now, since it's 30 days until that JDF paperwork takes effect. and then I'll just close this issue. Thanks for flagging this one.
On that subject, there's a really old issue from 2019 about updating CLAs and copyright notices in GraphQL repos, which I assume has been dealt with by now. That is issue number 291. I'll paste it into the chat.
Last time I checked, it wasn't, and I spoke with Brian about that. So Brian said technically we can change copyrights and other stuff, but it's better if it's done by Facebook engineers, since
yeah. Let me take this one as an action item. And if whoever's taking notes can just drop a link to this in that action item so we know to follow up with it. I think I got the libGraphQL parser one.
Yeah, so
that's why it's crossed out.
We opened that like 2 years ago or whatever, and you did do it, Lee. You fixed it years ago.
Okay.
And the remaining thing was the CLA. There wasn't at the time anywhere to point to a GraphQL Foundation CLA. So the language wasn't a problem, but I think everybody agreed that language was fine. We just needed one that wasn't Facebook.
Yep. Yeah. Leave this action item on me and Brian. We'll just do an audit. We're going to comb through everything in that namespace repo by repo and just gut check that we haven't missed anything. I believe I did that last time this issue is passed, and I'm sure I missed something. So, because I think I've heard reports of it in the last couple of months as well, that there's still some places that we haven't caught. So I'm gonna close this old issue since it seems like we did fix those things, but I'm glad that we still have that action item to just comb through and make sure we've got everything.
So in the old issue, sorry for the throat. The one you crossed out is done, but I don't know, is there a CLA now that can be pointed to? I think that part was remaining.
The data loader one that's also linked is also fixed. I just clicked through to that one and it says project's code of contact is described in GraphQL Foundation's code of contact MD. And that one links to the right place.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The problem is if you click on the crossed out one, then it doesn't currently link to any CLA at all.
Ah, okay. Good to know. Yep.
I think probably it was you. Somebody removed the Facebook one, but it needs to add a GraphQL Foundation one.
It has a link, but it's like not a good one. It says see the code of contact featured in, and then it just links you to the folder, which is like not terrible because you click there and then you see another link there that says code of conduct, but it would be nicer if it links straight to it. So let me take that as part of that follow-up action item I'll just get the same template for code of conduct links and just make sure it's applied to every single repo.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Cool.
Whoever did the notes for this section, like, good job, really good notes.
Yeah, who do we have to thank for this?
I mostly just put the little numbers and links in, but there was another cursor moving around.
They're all various anonymous animals. So I don't know who's who.
I promised that I would help Benji out a little bit. Hi, Eloy.
Oh, welcome, Ella. We missed you in the intros at the beginning.
Yeah, yes, this is my first week in Teams, and I'm gonna go full ahead with GraphQL after being gone for a year. So I had some meetings that I had to attend, but I will be here for the next round.
No worries. Thanks. We're glad you're here. Is that everything? Did we cover our full agenda?
Yeah, I believe that's it.
Amazing. Okay, folks, let's wrap up. Thanks for all your hard work. If things pop up between now and next that need attention, please leverage Slack. Otherwise, Thanks everybody for your attention, work, and great contribution to the discussion so far. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.